Twix Crumbl style cookies are absolutely everything. We have a gorgeous crunchy cookie base followed by a delicious layer of homemade caramel, milk chocolate on the top, and then lots of Twix pieces to finish. These cookies are an absolute masterpiece. They're probably one of my favorite Crumbl cookie dupes, and so I'm super excited to be sharing with you guys how to make them this week. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. We're gonna get started with our caramel first, and the reason that we're doing this is so it has time to cool down and set, because we wouldn't be able to add our caramel onto our cookies if it was still really hot and runny. As you can see in front of me, we've got all of our ingredients for our caramel here, starting off with double cream, then we've got unsalted butter, and then finally we've got caster sugar. The really good thing about caramel is it doesn't really require too many ingredients. I would say you really want to make sure your double cream and unsalted butter is at room temperature. Otherwise, if it's too cold, it can actually cause the caramel to seize up. So the first thing we need to do is take a medium non-stick saucepan, and the reason it needs to be non-stick is because we don't want the sugar to get like stuck at the edges and then burn. And then really simply, we're just going to pour in our caster sugar, take it over to our stove on a low heat, let the sugar melt using a spatula to stir it occasionally. It might look a bit lumpy and crystallized, but don't worry because it will eventually melt away throughout the process. There's many ways that we can fix that as we go through. So let your sugar melt until it's a light golden brown color and then take it off the heat. And then once our sugar has fully melted, we're going to add in our room temperature unsalted butter, and this is going to start making a bit of a reaction with the sugar. It's going to make it bubble and maybe fizz a little bit, but that's completely normal. Just keep stirring, and like I said, it's really important to use room temperature butter, otherwise it can seize up. But if that does happen, don't worry because that can be fixed later on in the process. And when you add your butter, make sure you do it when it's not on the heat. And then once that's been mixed together, put that back on the heat, pour in your double cream. So once your double cream is in the pan, we're going to keep mixing with a spatula or a balloon whisk on a low to medium heat and just let the mixture thicken up. You'll notice if there are any lumps that some of them will go away at this point, but if they don't, once your caramel's finished cooking, bring it back off the stove and then just simply pour it through a sieve, and that's just going to get out any remaining lumps. At this point, once you've got a silky smooth caramel, if you would like to add in a little bit of sea salt, then just do this at this point and stir it through. The best way to get your caramel cool as quick as possible is to pour it into a large bowl. The flatter the better, because the wider the surface area, the quicker it's going to take to cool down. So let's move on to making our cookie dough. As you can see in front of me, we've got all of our ingredients here, starting off with our Twix bars. Then we've got caster sugar, plain flour, vanilla extract, 1 egg, margarine, and then bicarbonate of soda. So let's get straight into it. The first thing we're going to need is a large mixing bowl, and for these cookies, you can make them either by hand with an electric hand mixer or a balloon whisk, or you can also use a stand mixer. The first thing we're going to add into our bowl is our caster sugar. We only use caster sugar for these Crumbl cookies because it's going to help us get that really nice spread that we're looking for, while also keeping that nice light color that we want for these Twix cookies. Following on from our caster sugar, we're going to add in our margarine. You can also use room temperature unsalted butter if you'd prefer, but I have developed this recipe with margarine and I really like the results. Once those are both in the bowl, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. If you're using a stand mixer, you're going to add on the paddle attachment, but because I've only got my hand mixer today, I'm going to be using these attachments and they do the same job really. And then we're going to be mixing on a low to medium speed until all the ingredients have been mixed together and they're light, fluffy and creamy. It doesn't take too long, probably between 1 to 2 minutes. So when that's been completed, we're just going to crack in 1 medium room temperature egg and then mix again. It might look a bit curdled at this point, but don't worry because adding in our dry ingredients will fix that. The final things we're going to add to the dough are our plain flour, and we always use plain flour for these cookies because it's going to help us get that really nice flat shape that we're after. And then once that's in the bowl, we're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, which again is going to help us get that nice spread and really nice crackly texture on the cookie that we're looking for. We want them to be as circular and flat as we can get, but kind of like a thick flat, if that makes sense. So like a flat top, but still like thick at the edges basically. At this point, if you're using a hand mixer, switch over to a spatula, but if you're using the stand mixer, then you can keep using the paddle attachment. And then we're simply just going to mix this together until we form our cookie dough. It's all going to come together into a nice ball and it shouldn't be too wet or too dry. And here we have it. It's as simple as that. We now have our cookie dough. So one of the first things we're going to do is preheat our oven to 170 for a fan oven or 190 for a convection oven. So what we're going to do now is take 2 baking trays and line them with baking paper. We're just going to divide the cookie dough into 8 equally sized balls and place 4 per tray in a diagonal pattern, because that way when they spread, they don't all become one giant cookie and get stuck together. Once they're all on the trays, we're just going to press the tops down until they look sort of like flat discs. And the reason that we do this is because it's just going to help these cookies on their way in the oven to get that really nice flat top that we're after. And then we're going to bake them 1 tray at a time for about 10 to 12 minutes. You'll know when they're done when the edges look a light golden brown color. And also don't forget that cookies continue to bake once they're out the oven. So start keeping an eye on them from 10 minutes. And if they look like they need the extra 2 minutes, then go for that. But if they're looking fine at 10 minutes, then bring them out because they'll continue cooking. And also every oven runs runs at different temperatures, so some ovens run hotter than others. And then once they're out the oven, if they're not perfectly flat, just take a spoon and gently tap the tops of each cookie to get that nice flat surface that we're after. And also, while our cookies are baking, if your caramel isn't as cool as you'd like it to be, you can add it into the fridge and then just keep checking on it and giving it a stir every 5 minutes until it's cool. So our cookies are baked. What we're going to do now is basically let them completely cool before we move on to the next step. And this step is basically crucial for this recipe, and the reason being, if we don't let our cookies cool down, it will heat the caramel up when we put it on after, and then that caramel is just going to start seeping out and leaking all over the place. Once they are cool, what we're basically going to do is retrieve our caramel and spoon on really nice dollops of the caramel onto each cookie and just spread it around until it's nice and flat. Then we're going to add our cookies into the freezer for about 15 minutes, just to give the caramel time to firm up before moving on to the final step. And then just keep reviewing it every 5 minutes to see if the caramel is nice and firm. It doesn't need to be like rock solid, but firm enough that when we add our chocolate, they're not going to sort of mush together. While they're in the freezer, towards the end, we're going to melt our milk chocolate, and we're just going to add that into a bowl, making sure it's broken up into small pieces, which is going to help it melt quicker. We're going to add it into the microwave for 15 seconds at a time, stirring between each burst until it's fully melted. Once that's melted, we're going to retrieve our Twix bars, chop them up into small pieces. Once that's done, we can take our cookies out of the freezer, spoon on our milk chocolate onto the top of each cookie. You want to basically make sure you keep the chocolate contained within the caramel, so we get a nice outer ring of caramel basically. Once that's on there, we're going to sprinkle on some Twix pieces, add the cookies back into the freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes just so the chocolate can firm up, and then they're done. That is how to make the most delicious Twix Crumbl style cookies. I am honestly so happy with how these turned out. We've got that gorgeous vanilla-y cookie base, followed by the most dreamy ooey gooey caramel, and then that milk chocolate and the Twix pieces on top. It's just chef's kiss. These are absolutely divine. You guys need to try them as soon as you can. So yeah, on that note, I hope you enjoyed coming along with me to learn how to make these today. If you did like the video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly baking content, and I'll see you next week for a new video.